In a world where moments often go unnoticed, sometimes a single act of kindness can change the entire course of someone's life. This is the story of a young gas station worker who found himself in the right place at the right time, facing a decision that would challenge his values, test his instincts, and lead him down a path he never imagined. It starts with a simple gesture, a gesture so small, yet powerful, that it left an undeniable impact on everyone involved. It's a typical day for 17-year-old Malik, working his shift at a local gas station. Nothing special, just another routine in his life. Little did he know that today would be the day when an ordinary interaction would take a turn he could never have expected. As he rang up a cop's coffee and snacks, his mind was somewhere else, lost in the humdrum of the job, until something caught his eye, a receipt with an empty space. At the same time, halfway across town, a pregnant white woman, struggling to make her way home, boarded a crowded bus. The bus was packed with commuters, each too absorbed in their own world to notice the lady standing in the aisle, clutching her swollen belly. That's when Malik saw her, his heart racing as he remembered what his mother always taught him: always be kind, especially when it's hardest. Without thinking, he rose from his seat, offering it to her with a quiet smile. The woman, grateful but exhausted, took the seat, and that's when Malik's life would take a turn. What happened next is something no one saw coming. The woman, after a brief moment of silence, reached into her bag and pulled out something that would change Malik's life forever. What was in that envelope? What did she write on that small, seemingly insignificant note? And how did it tie back to the cop at the gas station? As the story unfolds, you'll discover how Malik's simple act of kindness connects with these strangers in ways none of them could have predicted. The police officer, the pregnant woman, and Malik, 3 lives, each on their own path, suddenly intertwined in a moment of fate. But here's the catch: the message on the receipt wasn't just a thank you note. It was something much deeper, something that could potentially open doors Malik never even knew existed. Stay tuned as we dive into the second part of this incredible story, where everything you thought you knew takes an unexpected twist. What will Malik do next? How will this chance encounter with a stranger change everything? You won't believe the life-changing message that follows. Keep watching, because this story is far from over. As Malik sat back in his chair behind the counter, the sound of the door chiming as customers walked in and out became background noise to his thoughts. His shift had started off like any other, routine and uneventful. It was the same old, customers with the same requests, the same small talk, and the same motions. But what happened next changed everything. He couldn't shake the image of that pregnant woman on the bus from his mind. She had looked so tired, so drained. The discomfort she must have felt from standing for so long, with her belly heavy and her face weary, stuck with him. He'd grown up learning to be respectful, to always offer help when it was needed, especially in situations where someone couldn't help themselves. His mother had drilled that into him, reminding him constantly of the importance of looking out for others, even when it felt uncomfortable. It was just a seat, he thought. A small act of kindness. And yet, that decision had set off a chain of events Malik wasn't prepared for. He thought back to the brief exchange between them, how she had accepted his offer with a thankful smile. That smile was all he needed to know he had done the right thing. But he had no idea that something as simple as giving up his seat could lead to a moment that would change the course of his life. Later that afternoon, while the sun dipped low in the sky, a police officer walked into the gas station. Malik barely looked up at first, just going through the usual motions of his job. He had seen officers in and out of the store before, most of them on their way somewhere, grabbing a quick drink or snack. This officer, though, was different. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and wore a stern expression. He walked up to the counter and dropped his items, his eyes locking with Malik's for a moment. It was a brief exchange, but it was enough for Malik to recognize something in the officer's demeanor. There was something unsettling about him, a tension that Malik couldn't quite place. "Just the coffee and the chips," the officer said, his voice deep, almost too deep for the casual setting. Malik nodded, scanning the items, trying to ignore the nervous knot in his stomach. He wasn't sure why he was suddenly uneasy. Maybe it was the officer's presence, or the fact that his attention was focused entirely on him. Either way, Malik did his job and handed the officer the receipt, as he always did. But that's when something strange happened. As the officer grabbed his things, his eyes fell on the receipt. He paused for a second, staring at it with a flicker of surprise crossing his face. Malik's heart skipped a beat. He didn't know why, but he felt a surge of urgency, the kind you get when something feels out of place, like a small detail that you can't shake off. "Thanks," the officer muttered as he grabbed the receipt and slipped it into his pocket. Malik watched, confused, but the officer didn't offer any explanation. The interaction was over as quickly as it had begun, and the officer walked out of the store without a word. But Malik couldn't forget the way the officer had reacted to that simple receipt. He had seen something there, something more than just the usual list of items he had purchased. Curiosity gnawed at him, and he found himself glancing down at the counter, wondering if there was more to the officer's response than just a routine purchase. His thoughts were interrupted by a sudden movement at the door. A woman entered, her face familiar, though Malik couldn't immediately place her. She was older than him, probably in her early 20s, with short brown hair and a tired look in her eyes. She wasn't alone, there was a young child at her side, clutching her hand as they made their way to the counter. "Excuse me," the woman said, her voice soft but urgent. "I'm looking for. I don't know what it's called, but I need something for headaches. Something strong." Malik nodded, motioning for her to follow him down the aisle. As they walked past the rows of candy and snacks, Malik felt a strange pull in his gut. It was as if something was off, like he was being led to a moment that had been set into motion long before he realized. "Are you okay?" Malik asked, his voice gentle. He wasn't used to talking to strangers in this way, but something about her made him want to reach out. She paused for a second, glancing at him with a strange mixture of surprise and appreciation. "Just a long day. Too many things on my mind," she replied, not meeting his gaze. She seemed like she was carrying more than just a physical burden. As they reached the aisle with the headache medicine, the woman's eyes scanned the shelves, her gaze flickering between the options. Malik handed her a bottle of pain relievers, and for a moment, their eyes met. There was something in her look, a quiet, almost unspoken understanding that seemed to connect them. It felt strange, as though they both recognized something without ever having spoken about it. But before he could say anything more, the child tugged at her sleeve, pulling her attention away. "Mom, can we get some gum?" the child asked innocently, breaking the silence that had settled between them. "Not now, sweetie," the woman replied, offering him a soft but tired smile. Then, she turned to Malik and paid for the medicine. As she handed him the cash, her hand brushed against his for just a second, and Malik couldn't help but notice how cold her skin felt. It was as if she had been carrying an invisible weight that had left her drained, both physically and emotionally. She left the store without a word of farewell, taking the child's hand and stepping out into the dimming evening light. Malik stood there for a moment, feeling unsettled. It wasn't just the interaction, it was the feeling that something bigger was unfolding, something that would connect all of these strange encounters. He went back to his post behind the counter, trying to shake off the feeling that had settled over him. As the evening wore on, the store quieted down, and the usual hum of the gas station resumed. But the weight of the day still hung on Malik's shoulders. It was as if the universe had placed him in the midst of something he couldn't understand yet. And then, as the night deepened, Malik found himself thinking back to the officer and the pregnant woman on the bus. What was the connection? Why had he felt so compelled to act in those moments? He had no answers. But one thing was clear, whatever was happening, it wasn't over. It was only just beginning. What did the officer know? What had that note meant? And how would this story unfold from here? The answers were still out of reach, but Malik felt an undeniable pull toward finding out. He couldn't shake the feeling that his life was about to change forever, and the next steps would reveal everything, whether he was ready or not. As the days passed, Malik couldn't shake the feeling that something was brewing just beneath the surface. The events of that day, the officer's strange reaction to the receipt, the pregnant woman's quiet gratitude, and the underlying tension in the air had begun to gnaw at him. It wasn't just his mind playing tricks on him. Something about these encounters felt connected, something he couldn't quite piece together. But it was more than just curiosity now, it felt like a pull, like fate was leading him toward something bigger than he could comprehend. That evening, As he walked home after his shift, the weight of the world seemed to press down on him. The city streets were quiet, almost too quiet for a late night. He walked faster, trying to push aside the unease creeping into his chest. The silence felt oppressive, and every street corner, every shadow seemed to hide something just out of reach. His phone buzzed in his pocket, pulling him out of his thoughts. It was a text from his mother. "How was your shift? Did you help anyone today?" Malik smiled slightly, the simple question grounding him. She always asked about his day, always made sure he knew that his actions mattered. He typed back a quick response, "Yeah, it was fine. Just another day." But as he hit send, he felt that same cold sense of unease return. It was like there was a puzzle he was meant to solve, and every piece was just out of his grasp. The next morning, Malik arrived early for his shift at the gas station. He had hoped a good night's rest would clear his head, but it hadn't. The strange feeling still lingered, like a shadow following him wherever he went. He punched in his time card and made his way behind the counter, trying to focus on the customers trickling in. But his mind kept wandering back to the events of the past few days. Then, just as he was starting to lose himself in the monotony, the door opened, and a familiar face walked in, the same police officer who had come by the other day. This time, there was something different in the officer's expression. He wasn't just passing through, he had purpose in his step, a quiet urgency in his eyes. Malik felt his pulse quicken, his stomach turning into knots. "Hey, kid," the officer said, his voice deeper than usual, more serious. "Got a minute?" Malik nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. "Sure. What's up?" The officer leaned on the counter, glancing around the store as though making sure no one was listening. The tension in the air thickened, and Malik couldn't help but feel that he was about to hear something important, something that would change everything. "I need you to think back," the officer began, his voice lowered. "About the day you helped that woman on the bus." Malik blinked, caught off guard. "The pregnant lady?" The officer nodded, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Yeah. I've been looking into it. That bus ride, the way you helped her, it wasn't just some random act of kindness. You were involved in something bigger, kid. Something you don't fully understand yet." Malik felt a chill run down his spine. His instinct told him to back away, to pull away from whatever this was, but something deeper, something almost instinctual, made him stay rooted to the spot. "What do you mean?" Malik asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "I just gave her my seat." "I didn't." "You don't get it, do you?" the officer interrupted, his voice sharp, almost desperate. "You've been caught up in something much bigger than you realize. That woman, she's been involved in something dangerous. And you're connected to it now." Malik's heart raced. His mind spun with questions, but none of them made sense. Dangerous? He had only offered a seat. He didn't even know the woman's name. How could he be involved in something dangerous? "Look," the officer continued, his tone softening just slightly, "I'm not here to scare you. But you need to understand that you're not just some random bystander. There's a reason she took that seat from you, and there's a reason why you've been on her radar." Malik was silent for a moment, trying to process the weight of what the officer had just said. "What are you saying?" he finally asked, his voice trembling with a mix of fear and confusion. The officer hesitated before answering. "You've been marked. Something's coming, and whether you like it or not, you're going to be involved. The note she gave you? It's not just some thank you message. It's a warning. You're tied to this, Malik. And now you've got a choice to make." Before Malik could ask anything more, the officer turned and walked out of the store, leaving behind a trail of questions, his words echoing in Malik's mind. "You're tied to this." What did that even mean? And why did the officer seem so urgent? Malik couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible was looming on the horizon, but he didn't know where to look or what to prepare for. That night, Malik stayed up late, turning over the officer's words in his mind. Who was that woman? Why had she given him that note? What was this dangerous thing that the officer was talking about? He couldn't make sense of it, but one thing was clear: he was in the middle of something much bigger than he could have ever imagined. And he didn't know if he was ready to face it. The next morning, as Malik opened his phone, Something caught his eye: news reports about a series of unexplained disappearances. People were vanishing, just like that, and no one seemed to know why. The police had no leads, no suspects. But something in the back of Malik's mind told him that these disappearances were connected to the woman he had helped on the bus. It had to be. His phone buzzed again, this time with a message from an unknown number. Malik hesitated before opening it, his stomach turning. The message was simple, but the impact was immediate. You don't know who you're dealing with. Stay out of it. It's too late for you. Malik felt the blood drain from his face. Whoever had sent the message knew something he didn't, and whatever it was dangerous. He had no idea how deep this was going, but one thing was for certain: he couldn't walk away now. The tension in the air grew heavier. The danger was closing in, and Malik had to decide what to do next. But no matter how hard he tried to ignore it, he knew that he was already too far in to turn back. The story was only just beginning, and everything was about to change. Malik couldn't sleep that night. The message still hovered in his mind, its implications heavy on his chest. Stay out of it. It's too late for you. Those words echoed through his head like a warning, but who had sent them? And what exactly was he too late for? The weight of the unknown crushed him, and no matter how hard he tried to rationalize it, his gut told him something was spiraling out of control. The next day at the gas station, everything felt different. The usual hum of customers and the rhythmic beep of the register seemed distant, muffled, as though the world outside was moving at a different pace. Malik was hyper-aware, every movement and sound catching his attention. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching him, waiting for him to make a move. Every time the door opened, he tensed, half expecting anyone, to walk in with answers or threats. But no one did. The hours dragged on, and still, no sign of anything that could explain the whirlwind of chaos that had been growing in his life. Around noon, a stranger came in, a man in his 40s, dressed in a dark suit, his face hidden behind dark sunglasses. He looked out of place in the small-town gas station, as though he had stepped out of a world that Malik couldn't comprehend. He didn't say much, just walked up to the counter and placed a large bottle of water on it. Malik scanned it absent-mindedly, his mind still racing over the events of the past few days. When he looked up, the man was staring at him, his eyes hidden behind the tinted lenses, but Malik could feel the weight of his gaze. It was like the man was waiting for something, watching for a sign, for Malik to acknowledge something that wasn't visible. The man cleared his throat, breaking the silence. "You know more than you think," he said, his voice low, deliberate. "And the more you know, the more danger you're in." Malik froze, his heart pounding in his chest. He didn't speak. He couldn't. His mind was reeling, trying to process the words, to make sense of the strange, cryptic statement. The man leaned in, dropping a small folded piece of paper onto the counter. His fingers brushed Malik's hand, sending a cold shiver up his spine. "They're coming for you," the man continued, his voice even quieter now, almost a whisper. "It's already started." Without another word, the man turned and walked out, leaving the receipt and the note behind. Malik stared at the paper for a moment, too afraid to touch it, as if it might burn him. What had just happened? Who was this man? And what did he mean by "they're coming for you"? His hands shaking, Malik finally picked up the note and unfolded it. It was short, just a few words scrawled in hurried handwriting. "The woman you helped on the bus, she's not who she seems. Trust no one. Get out while you still can." The words hit him like a punch to the gut. This was bigger than he had ever imagined. Whoever was behind this, whoever had warned him, knew something about the woman he had helped. But how could he trust them? And what did it all mean? As the hours dragged on, Malik couldn't shake the sense of impending danger. Every customer, every sound, felt like a signal, a message he was too terrified to decipher. He found himself glancing at the door every few seconds, his nerves on edge. He knew something was coming, but he didn't know what it was or how to stop it. Then, just as the sun began to set, the gas station's phone rang. Malik jumped, the sound slicing through the quiet like a knife. He hesitated for a moment, his heart racing in his chest. He picked up the receiver, his voice strained as he answered, "Hello?" The voice on the other end was distorted, as though it was coming through a filter. "Malik," it said, its tone cold and unfamiliar. "You're running out of time. You're deeper into this than you think. You don't know who you're really dealing with." Malik's breath caught in his throat. He couldn't see the person, but the urgency in their voice made it clear. They knew him. They knew everything. "What do you want from me?" Malik asked, trying to steady his voice. "Who are you?" There was a pause, and for a moment, the silence felt suffocating. Then the voice responded, its tone sharp, threatening. "We've been watching you. It's too late to walk away now. You're tangled in something that's been brewing for years. You helped her. That was your mistake." Malik felt his world tilt. He had no idea who was on the other end, but their words rang in his ears. "You helped her. That was your mistake." He didn't understand what mistake they were talking about. The only thing he'd done was offer a seat to a pregnant woman on a bus. What could possibly be so wrong with that? "Why? What did she?" Malik started to ask, but the line went dead before he could finish. His hands were trembling now, his mind racing, his heart pounding in his chest. He didn't know what to do, where to go, or who to trust. The pieces were all there, scattered and broken, but nothing made sense. Why was he in the middle of this? Why him? And who were these people who had so much power, who had been watching him, waiting for him to make a mistake? The phone call had shattered whatever calm Malik had left. His thoughts were a whirlwind of confusion, fear, and helplessness. And then, as if to make it worse, the door to the gas station opened again. Malik's pulse quickened. He looked up, his heart in his throat. A figure stood in the doorway, silhouetted by the fading light. The figure stepped forward into the harsh fluorescent glow, and Malik's breath caught in his throat. It was the woman from the bus, the pregnant woman he had helped. But she didn't look the same. Her face was cold, her expression hard, almost menacing. She wasn't wearing the tired, exhausted look she had worn before. No, this was someone entirely different. Someone who seemed like they had a purpose that Malik had no idea about. The woman's eyes locked onto his, and for a moment, it felt like time stopped. Her lips parted as she took a slow step forward, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "You shouldn't have helped me," she said, her voice low and controlled. "Now, you're part of this. And there's no turning back." Malik's heart raced, his entire body tense with fear and uncertainty. This was it. The moment everything would change. The moment the truth would finally be revealed. But the question that hung in the air was still unanswered. What had he gotten himself into? Malik's heart raced as the woman stepped closer, her cold eyes never leaving his. Her words had sent a chill through him, but what chilled him even more was the look on her face. She wasn't afraid. In fact, she seemed to have the upper hand now, like everything was unfolding just as she had planned. And that scared Malik more than anything else. "You shouldn't have helped me," she repeated, but this time, her voice was quieter, almost mournful. "But I suppose it's too late for regrets now." Malik opened his mouth to speak, but the words wouldn't come. His mind was a whirlwind of confusion, fear, and disbelief. Everything had been so normal, so simple, until that moment. He had just given up his seat on a bus. He had no idea that small, seemingly insignificant act would lead him to this point, standing face to face with a woman who was clearly not who she had appeared to be. Just as Malik was about to ask what she meant, the gas station door swung open again. This time, it wasn't a customer, it was a man, tall and imposing, dressed in black tactical gear. He looked out of place in the gas station, his serious expression sending an immediate wave of unease through Malik's chest. The woman turned at the sound of the door, her eyes flashing with something that looked like recognition. Without a word, the man approached her, pulling a small envelope from his jacket pocket. He handed it to her, and she took it with a look of appreciation that made Malik's stomach churn. What was going on here? Were they working together? Was this some kind of setup? Before Malik could make sense of it, the man glanced at him, his gaze cold. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. "It's time to move, now." The woman turned toward him, her expression unreadable. Then, she shifted her gaze back to Malik, and for a split second, something in her eyes seemed to soften. "You don't understand, do you?" she asked, her voice almost sad. You're not just a random person caught in this. You've been chosen. You're part of something bigger than you can possibly imagine. Malik's mind raced as he tried to piece together the puzzle. Chosen? For what? To what end? Was this some sort of conspiracy, or was he simply in the wrong place at the wrong time? But none of those questions seemed to matter now, not when the man in black had already moved closer, his eyes scanning Malik like a predator sizing up its prey. Listen to me carefully, the man said, his voice low and threatening. There's a lot you don't know. A lot you're not supposed to know. But you've already crossed the line, and now you're in it. And there's no getting out. Malik felt his breath catch in his throat. He had no idea what was going on, but this wasn't just some random encounter. This was intentional. He had been dragged into something far bigger than he had ever realized, something dangerous. But what was it? What had the woman been involved in? And why was this man so certain there was no turning back? The woman stepped forward, her eyes locking onto Malik's once more. They'll come for you, she said quietly, her voice heavy with finality. And when they do, you'll have a choice. But it won't be the choice you think. Just as Malik opened his mouth to respond, the front door of the gas station crashed open with a deafening bang. Malik's heart leapt in his chest, and he whipped his head around to see a group of men in dark suits rushing inside, their faces obscured by sunglasses. They moved quickly, like they had rehearsed this, their eyes scanning the room in a way that made it clear they were looking for something or someone. The man in black turned sharply at the sound of the intrusion, his hand instinctively reaching for a weapon at his side. But the woman stepped forward, blocking his path. Her posture was calm, controlled, but there was a certain power in her movements, an undeniable confidence. She wasn't afraid of these men. She was in charge. You don't have to do this, she said coolly, her voice carrying an authority that made the men hesitate. One of the men, a tall figure with a sharp jawline, stepped forward. Move, he said curtly. We're here for the kid. You've overstayed your welcome. The tension in the room spiked, the air thick with the weight of impending violence. Malik didn't know what was happening, but it was clear that this was no ordinary altercation. The group of men were clearly after him, there was no question about that. But why? What had he done to deserve this? Before Malik could fully process the situation, one of the men lunged forward, grabbing him by the arm and yanking him away from the counter. Come with us, the man growled. Now. The woman didn't move, but Malik could see her eyes flicker with something, fear, perhaps, or maybe regret. She knew something that Malik didn't. But now, it was too late for any explanations. The men weren't here to talk. They were here to take him. A struggle broke out, with Malik fighting against the man's grip. But the man was too strong, and his grip was ironclad. As they dragged him toward the door, Malik's mind raced. He had no idea who these people were or why they wanted him, but he knew one thing for sure, he was running out of time. They were closing in on him, and every second that passed felt like the walls were closing in tighter. The woman stepped back, watching the scene unfold with a mix of resignation and something else. Fear. Guilt. Malik couldn't tell. But one thing was certain, she wasn't going to help him. She was part of this. And now, so was he. As the men pushed him out into the street, Malik's heart pounded in his chest. There was no escape now. He had walked too far into this mystery, and now it was time to face whatever was coming next. The question was no longer what had he gotten himself into, it was who had been pulling the strings all along. And why? The cold night air hit his face as they threw him into the back of a black van. His mind raced, his thoughts spiraling, but one thing stood clear in his mind. He had no idea what he was about to face, but it was bigger, darker, and more dangerous than anything he could have imagined. And the real question now was, could he survive whatever was coming next? The van's doors slammed shut with a force that shook Malik to his core, and his heart hammered in his chest. The cold metal interior of the vehicle seemed to close in on him, the air thick with tension. As the engine roared to life, Malik felt a rush of panic. He had no idea where they were taking him, who these people were, or what they wanted, but he was certain of one thing, his life was no longer his own. He was in the middle of something far bigger than he could have ever imagined. The men in the van didn't speak. They simply sat in silence, their eyes fixed on Malik, watching him as if they knew something he didn't. The atmosphere was suffocating, and Malik's mind raced with questions. What did they want with him? Why had the woman warned him? Had she known this would happen? Was she involved in all of this, or was she a pawn in a much larger game? The van turned onto a secluded road, its headlights cutting through the darkness. Malik could feel the unease gnawing at him, but there was no way out. The men had made it clear he was going with them, no questions asked. But as the minutes ticked by, an idea began to form in Malik's mind. He had to act. He had to find a way to escape. He couldn't just sit there and wait for whatever fate these people had in store for him. Suddenly, the van came to a screeching halt, throwing Malik forward against the cold metal wall. The door swung open, and one of the men grabbed him by the arm, pulling him out. The others followed, their footsteps heavy on the gravel ground. Malik's mind raced, but before he could make a move, he was shoved into a dark building, its windows boarded up, its walls covered in shadows. "Sit down," one of the men barked. Malik obeyed, his pulse quickening as he took in his surroundings. The place was cold, empty, and industrial, like a warehouse or some kind of abandoned facility. There was no warmth, no human presence, just the suffocating silence and the feeling that something terrible was about to unfold. One of the men stepped forward, his voice cutting through the air. "You've been involved in something far more dangerous than you realize, Malik. You've crossed a line, and now there's no turning back." The words sent a chill down Malik's spine. Dangerous? What had he gotten himself into? Before he could respond, the man continued. "You've unknowingly been part of a covert operation, and the woman, the one you helped, was the key to all of this. You were never supposed to get involved, but now, it's too late. You've seen too much." Malik's mind raced. A covert operation? That made no sense. He had just helped a pregnant woman on a bus. What did that have to do with any kind of operation? And why had they been watching him? But the man wasn't finished. "You see, the woman you helped wasn't just a regular civilian. She was a part of a larger scheme, one that's been in motion for years. You were the last piece of the puzzle. A key part of the plan, whether you knew it or not." The revelation hit Malik like a freight train. He could barely process the magnitude of what the man was saying. Was he really the key to some kind of scheme? How had something so small, so innocent, turned into this? The door to the room suddenly creaked open, and Malik's head snapped toward it. His breath caught in his throat as the woman from the bus stepped inside, her expression unreadable. But this time, she was different. There was no sign of vulnerability, no trace of the exhaustion he had seen before. She stood tall, confident, and in control. "You've done well," she said, her voice low, but there was a strange undertone to it. "Better than I expected." Malik's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean done well? What is all this? What's going on?" She smiled, but it wasn't a kind smile, it was calculated, almost pitying. "You're still trying to make sense of all this, aren't you? The truth is, you've been part of this from the very beginning. You just didn't know it." Before Malik could respond, she turned to the man in black, who had been standing off to the side. "We're done here. Take him to the next stage." Malik's mind was reeling. Next stage? What did she mean by that? Where were they taking him? What was he really a part of? The man in black stepped forward, his hand on Malik's shoulder, guiding him out of the room. As they moved through the facility, Malik's thoughts raced. He couldn't believe what was happening. It felt like a nightmare, like he was trapped in a story he couldn't escape. Everything had spiraled out of control. And yet, as they reached the next room, something unexpected happened. The man in black opened the door to a small, dimly lit room. Inside, there was a table with several files scattered across it. At the center of the table was a small device, its surface sleek and metallic. The woman's eyes gleamed with something cold, almost triumphant. "This is it," she said, her voice steady. "The device we've been working on for years. It's what connects everything. And now, you're going to help us activate it." Malik's mind raced as he tried to understand what she was saying. What was this device? What did it have to do with him? He felt a sudden wave of panic rising in his chest. He wanted to fight back, to escape, but he knew the odds were stacked against him. These people had been watching him, controlling everything, long before he had even realized it. But as the man in black approached the device, something happened that Malik didn't expect. The woman's expression changed, her eyes widening with shock. She glanced at the man, her voice suddenly tight with fear. "No," she said, almost breathlessly. "It wasn't supposed to be like this." Malik felt a strange pull in his chest, like a realization was dawning on him. Before he could ask what was going on, the man in black froze. He looked at the device in horror, his hand hovering above it, but he didn't touch it. Something was wrong, something had gone horribly wrong. And then it hit Malik. The twist. The truth he hadn't seen coming. The woman wasn't just a part of the plan. She had been using him, manipulating him from the start. But there was something deeper at play here, a betrayal. She wasn't just part of the operation, she was trying to stop it. The room was silent for a moment, the tension thick in the air. And then the woman turned to Malik, her face grave. "You need to run," she said, her voice urgent. "Get out of here. You're in too deep now, but this isn't the end. It's just the beginning." Malik didn't know what to do. The world around him felt like it was crumbling. But as he made his decision, he knew one thing for certain. Whatever this was, it was far from over. And he had just become the key to the next stage in a game far darker than he could have ever imagined. As he turned to escape, the sound of footsteps echoed in the hall. The real game was about to begin. Malik's mind was in overdrive as he sprinted through the dark corridors of the facility. His heart was pounding in his chest, his breaths shallow and ragged. The woman's warning echoed in his ears, "You need to run. Get out of here." It was clear that the situation had spiraled far beyond anything he could have imagined. But why? Why had they been using him? What was the real story behind all of this? As he rounded a corner, he caught sight of a window at the end of the hallway, its glass cracked and dirty, but still a potential way out. Malik didn't think twice. He pushed himself harder, feeling the sweat slicking down his back, his legs burning from the exertion. His mind flashed back to the moment when he had first helped the woman, the feeling of doing something kind and simple. But now, that decision seemed to have triggered a chain of events that he couldn't stop. The footsteps behind him grew louder. They were getting closer. Malik glanced over his shoulder, one of the men was chasing him. His face was hard and determined, but there was a trace of something else in his eyes, fear, maybe. It made Malik wonder if even they were caught up in something bigger than they realized. He reached the window and didn't hesitate. His palms were slick as he tried to force the glass open, but the window was locked tight. Panic surged through him as the sound of footsteps closed in. He twisted the metal handle again and again, desperate. Just as he thought he was going to be caught, the window gave way with a loud crack, and he tumbled out onto the rough ground outside. Malik didn't stop to check if he had been spotted. He ran, weaving between trees and buildings, not looking back. The cool night air filled his lungs, but he was no longer focused on the immediate fear, he was thinking ahead, about what had happened and what still didn't make sense. He was in too deep now, but there had to be answers. He just needed to find them. Hours passed as Malik made his way through the dense woods, unsure of how far he had gone or where he was heading. He didn't have a phone, didn't know anyone who could help. All he had was his instincts and a growing sense that the woman's warning wasn't just a simple piece of advice. She knew something about the situation he didn't, and now he was going to find out what. The next morning, exhausted and disoriented, Malik stumbled into a small town. The streets were quiet, the sun just beginning to rise. He found a payphone at the corner of a gas station and, with shaky hands, dialed the only number he could remember. The call went through. It was his aunt. "Malik, are you okay?" Her voice was filled with concern, but also a sense of relief, like she had been waiting for him to call. "I don't know, Aunt Carla. I need help. Something's gone wrong. I don't know who to trust anymore." For a long moment, there was silence on the other end. Then, her voice returned, calm but serious. "You need to tell me everything. But first, get to a safe place. Don't go anywhere else. We need to talk." Malik's mind raced as he agreed, But he knew he couldn't go back home just yet. Not until he understood more of the truth. The woman had said the device wasn't supposed to be activated. She had mentioned choices, and he was starting to realize that whatever was going on, it wasn't as simple as a conspiracy or some covert operation. There was something deeper at play, something involving him directly. Over the next few days, Malik kept his distance from the people he once trusted. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were still watching him. But the more he dug into what had happened, the more confusing it all became. The woman from the bus, the man in black, the device, it was all part of a larger, shadowy network that Malik had unwittingly become a part of. And with each new clue, he realized that there were people in power who would stop at nothing to maintain control. But through it all, there was a glimmer of hope. The woman's cryptic words stuck with him. It's just the beginning. She hadn't been the enemy, despite everything that had happened. She had tried to warn him, to help him understand the true danger. Malik realized now that he wasn't just a pawn in this game. He had a choice, a chance to stop this from spiraling any further. He could either walk away and live in fear for the rest of his life, or he could step up, uncover the full truth, and fight back. He reached out to a few trusted allies, people who could help him piece together the puzzle, people who had connections in places Malik couldn't access on his own. He kept a low profile, but the information he gathered was shocking. The device the woman had spoken of was far more powerful than anyone had realized. It had the potential to alter not just his life, but the course of history itself. By the time Malik had enough pieces of the puzzle, he knew what he had to do. It wouldn't be easy. There were powerful forces at play, and he would need to be smarter, faster, and more strategic than ever before. But he wasn't alone anymore. And for the first time since the night everything had started, Malik felt like he could make a difference. The truth, he realized, wasn't always clear at first. Sometimes, it took a series of unexpected events, twisted and chaotic as they might seem, to reveal the path forward. He thought back to the woman, and to the message she had left him with, it's not the end. It's just the beginning. And Malik knew that, in a way, she was right. The world had changed, and so had he. Whatever the future held, Malik was ready to face it head-on. The stakes were higher than he had ever imagined, but he was no longer the scared young man caught in the middle of a mystery. He was in control of his own fate. And as he walked toward the unknown, the weight of everything that had happened pressing on his shoulders, he knew one thing for sure: he wasn't going to stop until he uncovered every last piece of the truth, no matter where it led.